끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Coming up on Arirang News. For the first time in 3 months in April, South Korea saw its inflation ease to below 3%. But prices of farm products skyrocketed, with apples rising by more than 80%. Steady growth is expected for the global economy, with the OECD raising its prediction for this year to 3.1%. With the US and China expected to outperform this year, the organization revises its outlook upward for South Korea to 2.6%. At the Nat'l Assembly, a special bill is passed to reopen the probe into the 2022 Itaewon crowd crush that claimed 159 lives, calling for an independent body to further investigate who's to blame. The opposition-led Nat'l Assembly also passed another bill on a special counsel probe into a Marine's death. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with South Korea's inflation easing in April. Consumer prices rose 2.9% on year, standing below the 3% mark for the first time in 3 months. But higher prices for fruits still remain burdensome for many. Our Park Gun-woo reports.
Inflation in South Korea rose once again in April, but at a slower pace than in the past few months. According to data released by Statistics Korea on Thursday, the country's consumer price index, a key gauge of inflation, saw an on-year jump of 2.9%. That was the first time since January that the index dropped below 3%, after consumer prices saw on-year increases of 3.1% in February and March. Core inflation, excluding volatile food and energy prices, rose 2.3% on year. But prices for agricultural goods, livestock, and fishery products were up 10.6% on year in April, as farm produce soared by over 20% last month. Prices of apples and pears saw an on-year increase of 80.8% and 102.9% respectively in the same month. That was the biggest rise for pears since related data was first compiled in 1975. An official from Statistics Korea said that prices for those particular fruits may not drop significantly until apples and pears are in season later this year, despite recent financial support from the government to stabilize inflation. One expert spoke about the need for certain policies to deal with the issue.
So ideally, we would want to reduce tariffs for fruits and vegetables which are produced in Korea but can be imported from abroad, as well as fruits and vegetables which cannot be produced within the Korean borders.
He said policies for the medium to long term are also required.
The government should look into the distribution sector for fruits and vegetables. There always have been some concerns that Korean distribution sector for fruits and vegetables were not very efficient, and they may have elements of monopoly, which raises the cost of fruits and vegetables sold in Korea much above global prices.
In April, industrial products and services were also up by 2.2% each, while energy saw an increase of nearly 5%. And the consumer price index for daily necessities, which measures the price of 144 daily essentials, saw a 3.5% increase compared to a year before. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
And to maintain this momentum when it comes to lowering inflation, the top office will launch 2 task forces, one for addressing livelihood and inflation, and the other for the nation's strategic industries. The Chief of Staff for Policies, Hong Tae-yoon, announced on Thursday that he'll oversee these groups, promoting collaboration across economic, social, scientific, administrative, and local agencies. The Livelihood and Inflation Task Force will focus on items that have rapidly rising prices and the ones that impact the whole industry. For the one on strategic industries, he highlighted key sectors such as semiconductors, automobiles, and heavy industries. The OECD forecasts an upward trend for the world's economic growth for 2024. It also revised up its outlook for the South Korean economy to 2.6% on the back of strong exports and a boost in private consumption. Our An Sung-jin brings the latest.
Though economic growth remains modest, the OECD forecasts a positive global outlook. In its outlook report released on Thursday, the OECD has raised the global economic growth rate to 3.1%, with a stable employment market and further slowdown in inflation. It stated that the global economy has been relatively resilient, with little change made from 2023 of 3.1% and the projected growth of 3.2% in 2025. Estimated growth for this year has been revised upward by 0.2 percentage points from February's predictions. Though development differs from country to country, developing countries, as well as the U.S. in particular, have shown stable growth. The OECD has raised the growth projection for the U.S. by 0.5 percentage points to 2.6%. For Europe, it remains sluggish as the energy crisis drags on. It still stressed that uncertainties remain due to geopolitical risks, extended high inflation for some countries, and the possibility of a sluggish recovery in the Chinese economy. As for South Korea, the OECD has raised its economic growth rate for 2024 to 2.6%, 0.4 percentage points higher than February's outlook. The presidential office elaborated on the country's upward revision.
This is largely due to a strong performance in major industries, such as semiconductors, and a better-than-expected recovery of private consumption.
He also added that the growth rate is the highest among G20 countries with a per capita income of over $20,000. The OECD provided further recommendations for the need for structural reforms, especially in pensions to respond to the rapidly aging society, and also suggested innovation in regulations to further support small and medium-sized businesses. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
At the Nat'l Assembly, the revised special bill on a new investigation into the 2022 Itaewon crowd crush tragedy was passed following a bipartisan agreement. But conflict remains over approval of a bill to investigate a Marine's death, which was unilaterally approved by the opposition. Our correspondent Yuna Jang reports.
Lawmakers at a plenary session of the National Assembly approved on Thursday a revised special bill for a new investigation into the 2022 Itaewon crowd crush disaster. It passed with 256 votes for, none against, and 3 abstentions.
I hope that through this bill, the truth about the Itaewon crowd crush will be investigated, its causes identified, and strong measures will be created to prevent similar incidents, making our society safer.
The opposition-controlled assembly passed a previous special bill regarding the Itaewon disaster in January, but was then vetoed by President Yoon Suk-yeol later in the month. Now, about 3 months since the bill was sent back to the National Assembly for a revote, the two main political parties agreed on Wednesday to add revisions to the bill. Before Thursday's vote, the chief deputy floor leaders of the ruling People Power Party and the main opposition Democratic Party held a joint press conference where they announced their agreement on a revision forming an investigative committee, its operational period, and methodology. The same day, the presidential office welcomed the agreement, saying that it considered it a tangible outcome of cooperation between the parties, which began with a meeting between President Yoon and main opposition leader Lee Jae-myung on Monday. Under the revision, the number of committee members will be reduced to 9 from 11. The chair of the investigative committee will be chosen through consultations between the rival parties, while each will recommend 4 members for the 8 remaining positions. The committee will not be allowed to request warrants, and it will operate for 1 year, although the term can be extended by up to 3 months. Meanwhile, the opposition-led assembly unilaterally passed a motion calling for a special counsel's investigation into the death of a Marine who was killed last July during a search and rescue mission for victims of flooding. The rival parties had failed to narrow their differences on this bill before Thursday's plenary session. Lawmakers of the PPP walked out in protest and boycotted the vote. The PPP has argued that an independent probe is unnecessary as the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials is currently looking into the case. Meanwhile, responding to the passage of this bill, the PPP's floor leader Youn Yuh-jung criticized the DP's swift handling of it, calling this reckless legislative behavior and stating he would advise President Yoon to exercise his veto power. The presidential office sharply criticized the passage, calling it highly regrettable that the opposition was using the death of a Marine for its own political agenda.
The DP's rush to push through legislation before the ink's even dry on the first page of the cooperation agreement goes against the mandate from the public and voters in the general election, urging the rival parties to work together to take care of people's livelihoods.
As an independent investigation agency for high-ranking officials installed by the former opposition government is currently looking into the matter, the presidential office stressed it is proper to wait for the results. It vowed to respond sternly to the opposition's disruptive move. 신하영, Arirang News.
Amid the ongoing dispute over the expansion of the number of students admitted to medical schools nationwide, most of them have had their total admissions places for next year finalized. Choi Soo-hyung explains.
On Thursday, the Education Ministry has confirmed that the new total increased enrollment quota for 2025 at 31 medical schools across the country has so far been confirmed at 1,469 places. If the governing body at Cha University accepts the government's quota for its medical school, then the number of new places could rise to a maximum of 1,509. 9 national universities outside the capital region decided to admit only 50% of their regional allocated increase, while private universities are either sticking with the regional allotted increase or lowering it by just a few students. This is in line with the government's acceptance a week ago of a proposal by the presidents of 6 national universities to allow them to freely determine the admission slots for 2025, ranging from 50% to 100% of the administration's original quota increase. From 2026, if the dispute between the government and doctors is resolved, the increase in the number of new places for students is expected to reach 2,000. The government is continuing to urge junior doctors and medical professors to engage in dialogue with it. On Thursday, Health Minister Cho Kyu-hong said one-on-one meetings were possible, but asked representatives of the doctors and professors to participate in the Special Committee on Medical Reform with a proactive attitude. Regarding junior trainee doctors who walked off their jobs to protest the government's expansion plan, Minister Cho urged them to return to their hospitals, adding his ministry will shorten the permitted continuous number of work hours starting this month. Meanwhile, an inauguration ceremony was held on Thursday morning for the new leader of the Korean Medical Association, the largest organization representing doctors. During the ceremony, Im Hyun-taek, the new head, stated that the current medical dispute was a case of an abuse of power by the government against doctors. He has been strongly critical of the government's plan, saying he will do his best to stop it. Im plans to form a consultative body consisting of medical students, doctors and medical professors. However, the head of the Korean Intern Residents Association said that to date, this has not been discussed. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
The government has raised its terrorism alert levels to the second highest in 5 embassies and consulates overseas. The decision was announced by the Foreign Ministry on Thursday. Those being the South Korean embassies in Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos, as well as consulates in Vladivostok and China's Shenyang. The measure was taken as South Korea's intelligence authorities recently obtained intel about North Korea's attempts to harm the South's diplomatic officials and citizens in those regions. The international community is looking for new measures to monitor sanctions against North Korea now that the United Nations panel of experts that has been doing the job has officially disbanded following Russia's veto on its renewal. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji explains more.
50 United Nations member states, including South Korea, the US, and Japan, have stressed the need to find new objective and independent analysis to monitor North Korea's sanction violations. In a joint statement delivered by the US ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, the country said the elimination of a UN expert panel tasked with overseeing sanctions on the regime had made it harder for the UN to implement binding Security Council resolutions.
Given the imperative for all member states to comply with relevant Security Council resolutions and considering the expiration of the panel, we must now consider how to continue access to this kind of objective, independent analysis in order to address the DPRK's unlawful WMD and ballistic missile advancement.
She added the countries look forward to working with all UN member states on the matter. And the South Korean government said it's reviewing various measures to build an effective mechanism with like-minded countries.
Regardless of the expert panel's mission being terminated, the South Korean government will closely work with the international community to ensure the implementation of UN Security Council sanctions against North Korea.
To replace the panel, the 50 member states have reportedly decided to review a plan to establish an independent body led by South Korea, the US, and Japan.
You'll have to do what you'll have to do, which is to inaugurate trilateral sanctions regime between the United States, South Korea, and Japan, and it's better than nothing. So I think it was a realistic option, and it all comes down to the matter of how three countries can really cooperate very closely to coordinate all these sanctions measures against North Korea.
Since its creation in 2009, the so-called panel of experts has played a key role in seeking to enforce UN Security Council resolutions against North Korea. The 8-member panel has produced related reports twice a year, keeping the international community informed about the regime's nuclear and missile activities. But last month, Russia vetoed the annual renewal of the panel, bringing an end to 15 years of operation, when the mandate expired on April 30th. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
The country's antitrust regulator on Thursday gave a green light to the acquisition of music giant SM by IT giant Kakao on condition. This could mean many changes to the music industry. Our Youn Yuh-jung explains.
Kakao has obtained regulatory approval for its controlling stake acquisition of SM Entertainment after a year-long process. This creates a powerhouse with Kakao, an IT giant, and SM, a market leader in music, and potential domination of both music production and distribution. The Fair Trade Commission on Thursday announced it had approved the acquisition of a 39.87% stake in SM Entertainment by Kakao Corporation and Kakao Entertainment, under the condition that corrective measures are implemented. To start, Kakao, who owns Melon, a domestic music streaming service, is not allowed to unreasonably reject or delay the provision of music to Melon's competitors. Additionally, it has to form an independent committee consisting of a minimum of 5 external members to routinely oversee any potential bias towards Melon. Kakao should implement these corrective measures for 3 years, with the right to request the cancellation or modification of them, should there be significant changes to the market conditions. This decision comes as the Commission believes that the transaction could significantly limit competition within the domestic digital music streaming market. It added that it is committed to safeguarding consumers from potential harm in the markets that closely impact people's daily lives. Beforehand, Kakao had already established vertical integration, spanning from music planning and production to music distribution and to the Mellow Music platform. By securing SM's popular music catalog as well, Kakao now stands as a leading player overseeing music production from creation to distribution. With the acquisition filed, Kakao's market share in music planning and production has risen to over 13%, while in music distribution and platforms it has reached about 43% and 43.6% respectively. Youn Yuh-jung, Arirang News.
The cost of housing has skyrocketed across South Korea, especially in Seoul. Our economics correspondent Lee Soo-jin shows us what one local government is doing to help its young residents.
House hunting is now over for some lucky young people. The local government of Seoul's Dongjaku district is renting out 36 units in this studio apartment complex for just 10,000 won, or around $7 a month. It's the first 10,000 won studio apartment in the capital city, and it's being offered at a time when the cost of housing is weighing on many young people. A recent survey showed that the biggest cost burden for South Koreans in their 20s and 30s is housing. According to a government official, the monthly rent for these studio apartments was originally around $100, already very affordable, but that was further lowered to $7 thanks to Dongjaku District's business ventures covering the remaining amount.
We're very pleased at the first place that the profit that we made through Dongjaku District Corporation's various business ventures is going to young people.
And the local government is also planning to offer larger studio apartments at this price for married couples as well in the future. To be eligible for these apartments, applicants had to be non-homeowners living alone and aged between 19 and 39 and with an income in the bottom 50%. Applicants were then selected through a lottery process. One successful applicant who wishes to remain anonymous moved in around a week ago and said that while the affordable price was a large part of why he applied, it's not the only reason, as the quality of housing is also high.
It's so clean and nice because it's a new building. And I think a huge plus of these studio apartments are the amenities and the common areas.
The 5-story building has parking on the ground floor exclusively for its residents. And the studio apartments that are on the 3rd to 5th floor of the building are not only spacious but also come fully furnished. Each apartment has a refrigerator, air conditioner, washing machine, and range hood, and the all-white interior is clean and crisp. The local government also has plans to turn the entire 2nd floor of the building into a space for youth development activities such as job training, all part of its bigger goal of providing not just affordable but also quality housing. Dongjaku district officials say that this is just the beginning and that with greater financial support from the central government, other local governments are likely to follow suit. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
The Academy Museum of Motion Pictures will be presenting a retrospective of Youn Yuh-jung's filmography for 9 days, starting from May 17th. Supported by the Korea Foundation, this series aims to celebrate her career of 50-plus years. The museum describes her as an irreplaceable, one-of-a-kind actor in the history of Korean cinema. The program will feature 8 of her major films, including Minari, for which she won the Best Supporting Actress Oscar at the Academy Awards, the first Korean to win such an award, as well as her debut film, Woman on Fire. Located in Los Angeles, the museum is the largest in the United States dedicated to the arts and sciences of movie making.
The warm spring sun shined all day today with clear skies. The temperatures will rise more for the next 2 days. The daytime temperature in Seoul will be almost 30 degrees Celsius, and the summer-like heat will continue. This early heat will ease off with rain across the country on Children's Day on Sunday. This rain is expected to be strong and heavy for spring, so caution is necessary. On the other hand, along with a clear and warm atmosphere, dry weather advisories are also being issued in Seoul and other parts of the central inland areas, so please prevent wildfires. Tomorrow morning, it will be a little cool like it was today. Seoul and Jeju will see 13 degrees. It will rise to 28 in Seoul, Daejeon, Gwangju, Daegu, and Gyeongju, 28 degrees. Temperature swings are continuing throughout the country. Under such conditions, it's easy to catch a cold, so please take care of your health. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that brings an end to this newscast tonight. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with the latest news tomorrow at 9 a.m. with New Day at Arirang. Good night.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠.